Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to the Youth Power Learning webinar, Youth-Driven Programming in Context of Volatility and Protracted Crises. I'm Rachel Stepka. I am the Youth Power Learning Communications Manager, and we're going to get started. So a little bit about Youth Power Learning if you're not familiar with our project. We are a USAID-funded project, and our goal is advancing knowledge to transform the lives of young people. We generate and disseminate knowledge about the implementation and impact of positive youth development, or PYD, approaches in international development. So what is positive youth development? PYD programs recognize youth's inherent rights and result in youth who have assets, the ability to leverage those assets or agency, and the ability to contribute to positive change for themselves and their communities, surrounded by an enabling environment that supports them. There are many ways we can partner together. You can connect with other Youth Power activities on our website, youthpower.org. You can also share resources, events, information, and what works. You can also contribute to our PYD learning agenda. We identify what works in youth development, how to measure PYD, and you can send your youth-related resources to info@youthpower.org. We also have youthlead.org, which is a platform for young changemakers under 35 years old. You can join the platform, and if you support youth networks or you want to support content for youth, you can become a sponsor. Finally, we have our communities of practice. These are 4 communities on different sector areas. The first is youth and peace and security. We also have gender and PYD, youth engagement, and cross-sectoral skills for youth. Next, I'm going to pass it on to our first presenter from USAID DRC, Pascal Chimanga. He works on the DRC project that he'll be presenting that today, which is the Integrated Youth Development Activity. Pascal, over to you.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Let me just get started, by, some thinking that went into the design of the actual USAID Integrated Youth Activity. Back in 2017, we went on a field trip in Eastern DRC to meet with these amazing youth to gauge their perspective. And we were quite impressed with their views and aspirations. For example, to the question, what are your dreams? A young woman in Goma said, Goma is an eastern part of the country, said, I want to help my country develop. And one other man, young man in Goma, said, I want to be autonomous by having a business. So, and in Bukavu, a young woman said, I want to create an enterprise and serve as a model for other women. I want to be an activist. And in Goma, a young woman said, I want to be a mayor of a city. So it's incredible. The youth have a very huge potential to tap into, and they are an incredible resource out there. We have articulated their views in a number of ways into the actual design of the activity. Just very quickly, they also see the earnings. They wanted to be involved in some type of economic opportunity, being involved in those activities for earnings, either for a job or an income generating activity. That's their top one sort of priority. They also mentioned that education is, a second one, and is often viewed as a pathway to get them to those earnings. There's also out there a host of, youth-led and youth-serving civil society organizations with very huge potential to tap into. They also reported that adults view them as victims or delinquents, and you will see in a second how that is being articulated in the actual design of the activity. Vocational training is not inclusive, of market linkages, support services like job intermediation services, work-based learning opportunities, access to capital. So that's what has been reported, and the activity tries to tackle that in a number of interesting ways. Soft skills were not included in the programs, at least for the level of youth we're trying to target, and of course, gender constraints, shape opportunities. Very quickly, this youth activity, supports these youth I've just talked about, 20,000 of them, aged 13 to 35 years old. And the main entry points are the existing structures out in Eastern DRC. So these are mainly the catch-up education centers, the private sector, the civil society organizations, and the Ministry of Youth and Ministry of Social Affairs at the provincial level. So we have system-level strengthening approach. It's a $22 million activity spanning over 3 years. Using a multi-sector integrated approach with funds coming from the education sector, the economic growth, the DRD, democracy, human rights and governance, and health sectors. It's integrated in nature, and there's a whole learning agenda behind it with an impact evaluation that USAID DRC is commissioned. And lastly, I won't spend enough time here. USAID DRC is inclined towards integrated programming. So this youth activity we're showcasing today is part of a cluster of activities encompassing also the household grants that benefit the same youth and being implemented through a separate mechanism. But both activities fit into the same overarching goal of increasing youth resilience to conflict and violence in Eastern DRC. Let me just stop there and pass the mic over to Jackie to discuss adaptable programming.
Hi, everybody. This is Jackie Kernan. Oops, back one. I'm really happy to be with you this morning. I am the project director for IYDA, working with EDC based out of Waltham, Massachusetts. So I'm just going to talk to you a bit this morning about the type of programming that we offer and the importance of having adaptable, flexible, and context-specific tools. So as Pascal has described, the context in Eastern DRC is quite challenging. The areas that we're working in can be characterized as post-conflict areas of intervention, but it's notable that the youth that we're working with have had spotty access to education, and so they are considered out-of-school youth. Our IYDA programming toolbox offers a number of tools that are geared towards accompanying these youth as they develop the knowledge, the skills, and the networks required to enter the workforce. This is a process-based approach that allows youth to choose their pathway and for us to work with both school-based resources and the community to accompany them along the way. So the first kind of general tool that we have in our toolbox is the set of curriculum that we've developed for the basic skills. That's reading, writing, and math. We're working in accelerated learning centers where youth that have missed school can complete 2 academic years in 1 academic year. And youth are able to complete their primary school education thus in 3 years rather than 6 and are prepared to sit for the national exams. In the current context, most of these schools, the teachers are using the traditional curriculum that's been made available to primary schools, and on their own are trying to consolidate that material into 1 year of teaching, which is really challenging. So IYDA provides curriculum that's been designed to address 2 years of learning in 1 year. And that's really working towards enabling teachers to provide quality education to the youth. We also are working in the TVETs, the technical vocational education and training centers. And there we are supporting teachers and learners with some basic numeracy material. And this is in complement to some existing literacy material that's also been supported by USAID through a different project. We then look at some soft skills curriculum that we're introducing into all of our learning centers. And while the soft skill curriculum is really looking to prepare students for employability by developing skills such as teamwork, leadership, customer service, communication, this is all working to support youth become more active and positive contributors in their daily life, in their household, and in their community. Work Ready Now is being provided to all youth in the program. Now, again, just going over kind of some really basic soft skills that are required both for employment and day-to-day integration within the community. And then we have our Be Your Own Boss curriculum, which is made available to those youth who choose to follow an entrepreneurship pathway rather than a pathway that might see them continuing their education into secondary school or maybe choose to seek out wage employment. We then have a component of the project that really focuses on community engagement, and that's looking at both opportunity for youth, such as providing youth with an opportunity, skills training, and direction to become youth mappers in their community, as well as participation in youth development alliances. And our colleagues from FHI will be discussing this in more detail a little bit later. There's also community engagement in the form of support that are provided to our youth in the project. And this is primarily done through a number of literacy volunteers. So these are educated youth in the community that are seeking to give back to their community or to engage in one way or another with these out-of-school youth that are in these accelerated or alternative learning programs. And they provide mentoring and tutoring support outside of school hours. And they've done a fantastic job last year helping a number of our youth prepare to sit successfully for their primary school exams. And then finally, we have a whole work-based learning component where we have livelihood and business mentors available for youth that have finished their alternative education program and are looking to enter the workforce. And we also work with a number of private sector actors in terms of providing a number of different forms of internships. And this is really looking at learning by doing, which is a fantastic approach from youth in our program who don't usually have access to this type of learning experience. I think key really in terms of having successful programming in such a volatile context that's characterized by protracted crises is recognizing that one size does not fit all, and ensuring that our programming is adaptable, meaning that I'm just looking. All material goes through an adaptation process. So we're looking to ensure that the material reflects cultural norms, is appropriate for the various education levels, existing education levels. So how literate not only are the students, but are the teachers and the trainers in the centers that we're working with, and really looking to ensure that there is affiliation with the users' values and ideals to make the most impact. We're also looking at a flexible programming. So a module-based approach with material that builds off previous laid foundations really permits us to have custom-made materials tailored to fit the needs of the population, and again, ensure the most effective programming. This means we're able to see what works for what age group and to make modifications as required. So for example, the youth that are in level 3 of the accelerated learning program in our centers tend to be quite young and tend to be focused on continuing education beyond primary school. So they don't need to go through the complete continuum of employability programming at that age. They can get the basic work-based learning material, and then at a later date through various community managed opportunities, look to access information through the Be Your Own Boss and the work-based learning opportunities. Our approach is also scalable. So our material, our curriculum specifically, has been built to mirror the national curriculum. And currently at the national level, the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Social Affairs is looking to validate and incorporate some of the material that IYDA has produced into a more formalized curriculum for alternative learning programs. And this means that we can scale our material at a national level. The challenge, I think, there is ensuring that the teachers and the trainers have the access to the training and the supervision required to support a wider rollout. There's also, as I had mentioned before, the learning by doing for both teachers and students. We use a cascade approach to training on new material, and this really ensures that there's a pool of master trainers that's local and that is continuing to grow and available for other actors in the region. So again, just kind of going back to the context, I spoke a little bit about the profile of our partners on the ground and the youth that we're working with, but there's also a need to ensure that our teams and our programming can make very quick modifications and adapt to evolving crisis or conflict.
This conference has reached the maximum allowable time and will be ended. All callers will be disconnected.
I don't know if I'm still able to speak. Hello? Rachel?
Hi, Jackie, please, I think you can continue.
Okay. I'll try to wrap it up. But yeah, no, so it's really important for us that we are able to build an approach that can provide technical assistance, even if our teams have to pull out due to volatility of the situation. And this involves really looking at building local capacity in this relatively new subject matter in Eastern DRC. And that, again, just like a last point on that, we've focused a lot on building the tools and the systems required to ensure fidelity of training beyond the scope of the project, or beyond the lifetime of the project, I would say. And then increasingly relevant education is just like the importance that we see in updating education material to ensure that the education opportunities are meeting the goals and objectives of the youth. So the material that we're providing is really fostering an entrepreneurship mindset and really looking at linking education programming to livelihood opportunities, which is really in line with the expectations that these youth have or the goals that they've set for themselves. I think also the focus that we have on soft skill development is really looking to equip youth with the tools required to thrive, both in their professional life, but also in their community life and their household and individual family lives. And then finally, I spoke a little bit about the context-informed supplemental modules and really ensuring that the material that we're making available to the learners corresponds to their needs. And so in the DRC, for example, we have supplemental modules that address sexual and reproductive health as well as civic engagement. And then finally, I am just sharing a little bit of the impact that we've seen thus far. So within the first cohort of our learners in the project, we've seen a 53% increase of youth who believe that they are of value in their society and that their positive contributions are recognized, which is just fantastic. Building that self-confidence is just key to success. We've also seen a significant increase, 43.5%, of youth who are showing positive attitudes of tolerance and nonviolent means to address conflict drivers and conflict management. Again, this is really critical. These youth have grown up in environments and have known pretty much constant conflict, violence, and displacement. And so shifting that mindset is really, really important to breaking the cycle of crisis. And then finally, this 8% increase in students' perception of safe school environment is really interesting because we haven't worked on the physical infrastructure of the schools. We've worked more on the quality of education that's provided, and that really contributes to perceptions around a safer learning environment. And my final point on that is a great segue into my colleague Heidi Carr's presentation, because we're working a lot with teachers and building their resilience and healthy coping mechanism skills to better be able to support the youth that have been affected by trauma in their classrooms. And this is making a difference. So with that, I'll hand over to Heidi.
Heidi, you can go ahead now. You should have speaking rights. Heidi, could you try speaking again, please? We are having trouble. Okay, I think we can hear you now.
Can you all hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Many apologies. Sorry about that. So yes, I'm Heidi Carr. I'm a clinical psychologist with Education Development Center, and just wanted to give you all an overview of what we're doing to support teachers' well-being and psychological health in the project. You know, first of all, I'd just like to say that more and more across projects, the understanding that students need some kind of mental health intervention, and you know, sometimes it's social emotional learning, but in many of the environments we work in, there's a much higher need. That is starting to be recognized more and more across the world. But one thing that Education Development Center has realized in our work is that teachers are still left behind in this. And so while there's more and more focus that youth need these services and the right kind of assessment and the right kind of interventions within education, we have realized that teachers also need that kind of support. But don't take it from us. We have asked teachers in our IYDA project across geographic areas kind of what the need is. We wanted to learn from them. And we've seen that almost 20% of teachers have said in the last 3 months they have lost control in the classroom, whether that be through yelling or through some kind of physical aggression. These are the teachers that are kind of admitting that to us, that they are reaching those points of kind of feeling out of control of themselves. Over 40% of our teachers have said that they believe their own experiences with violence affect them, which we know to be true of everyone, right? These experiences don't just go away. And our teachers are experiencing the same kinds of trauma and violence and other stressors that everyone in our context are experiencing. 12% of our teachers in a recent survey said that they know of more than 15 students who have reported abuse in the last 3 months, which is staggering. And it also goes to this point that, you know, many people say, well, you know, our teachers are overburdened, they have too much to do anyway, they don't have any place in kind of learning how to talk about trauma or learning how to recognize symptoms of mental health issues. But the reality is our teachers are saying they know. They already know these things are going on. These are not hidden. And in fact, the next bullet speaks to the fact that 80% of our teachers said they've had a direct discussion with at least one student in the last 3 months about trauma. And so the teachers are having these discussions. They're trying so hard to support their students without any training, without any skills, and without any support for their own mental health, which of course is weighed upon when they're trying to support their students, and most of them are telling us in this final bullet you'll see that they feel ill-equipped to even have a conversation to support their students. So we just want to give you a little bit about the development and implementation process we followed in this project. We believe very much at EDC on interdisciplinary teams and making sure our project team is staffed appropriately. As a clinical psychologist, I joined the project team, had a series of virtual meetings and also field-based meetings to understand not only context currently in the sites we're working in, but also how our teachers conceptualize emotional distress. So, are they describing their distress in terms of anger, in terms of sadness, in terms of hopelessness? All of that context was obtained. And then we took evidence-based interventions, which are used in therapy offices and group therapy and individual therapy, all of the gold standard mental health interventions, and basically adapted them for our teachers, so that teachers with no background in mental health or even emotional kinds of teaching topics would be able to understand and teach their fellow teachers these same kinds of skills. And we focus, of course, on helping teachers understand how to build skills and how to change some of the behaviors that they may be using, which are not helping them cope with the situations they're in. We had a 3-day training of trainers workshop in the field in which EDC trained a set of master trainers who were teachers and school administrators, so that they could in turn teach their peers, teach the other teachers and administrators in the project in the ensuing months, and that's going on now. And the hallmark of this training was trauma-informed education. So a lot of people, again, assume that training in trauma-informed approaches is for the good of the students, but it's also for the good of the teachers. So creating that trauma-informed environment is central for everyone in the school system. So we started with that. We talked about basic psychological theory, again, in ways that are very intuitive and understandable for people who don't have a mental health background, but which are the key to healthy psychological health. And then we help them think about how to deliver the curriculum effectively. And the beauty, of course, in working with teachers is that they already know how to teach so well. And then we, of course, added in an evaluation component to figure out how effective this approach is. A little bit about just the first half day of training. Focused on foundations of psychological theories and psychosocial approaches. So we wanted to kind of set a foundation of understanding how our thoughts influence our emotions, which influence our behaviors, so that teachers started to understand when they get upset and they use physical aggression against a student, which we know is common in many of the settings we work in. All of that can be traced back to our state of mind, to how we were thinking. And so we have to control and work really hard to make as healthy as possible the way we think and perceive things. A little bit about neuroscience so that they understand the youth. A lot of the youth they're teaching, certain areas of the brain are not fully developed until we are 25 or 30 years old. That's true for all human beings. And so helping them to understand a little bit more about why risk-taking is such a key part of being young and how a teacher can support that. And then talking a little bit about extreme behaviors and extreme and rigid ways of thinking and how that leads to things like violence. So all of this preparation then led into development and administration of a 16-hour teacher's resilience training. Again, all of this is evidence-based. These are evidence-based concepts which we have adapted to be appropriate for teachers to support each other. And you'll see there are 3 sections here. of the curriculum, the first 2 sessions focus on teachers and their well-being, helping them to become aware of what is going on for them, how they respond in certain situations, and why, how past trauma may be affecting the way they interpret things in the classroom. The session 2, Taking Care of Ourselves, really focuses on the skill building, helping them to learn evidence-based coping skills to manage anxiety and anger and depression, to recognize some of those feelings that drive a lot of unhealthy behaviors. But that last session, session 3, is how to support students, how to have some of those conversations, which we know the teachers are having anyway, but they don't feel prepared. They're asking for more support at how to show support to a student who needs it. And interestingly, again, a lot of people say teachers don't have the time or the bandwidth to do this. This is the section teachers were most interested in all honesty. They did want to learn how to take care of themselves, but they also really want to know better how to take care of their students in a way that's appropriate for their role as a teacher. We included training tips and accompanying participant guide, and we also included audio instruction, of course, in French, so that they can practice meditation skills, so that they have this audio guide to help them practice and really solidify the new learning. This is just a little bit to show you the way that we bring those psychological concepts, those evidence-based concepts, to the level that's appropriate for a teacher to teach others after a 3-day training. Decision making. So how do you evaluate pros and cons of a behavior? So taking teachers through, all right, so you got really angry at a student and you hit them. What were the advantages of that? What were the disadvantages? What could have been an alternate way of reacting? This may seem so basic in terms of decision-making 101, but this is the hallmark of cognitive behavioral therapy. And so it's repackaging these things that we know work when a clinician is doing them for teachers. And anger management, helping people understand the biological and the psychological processes that go on when we get angry. Until they understand that arc and how anger builds, no one is going to understand how to identify warning signs in themselves that the anger is building, and learn how to do something to bring the anger down before they react or before they engage in some kind of behavior that's going to make the situation worse. And finally, I'll just end with a little bit about the coping skills. I mean, the main thrust, of course, of this curriculum is to give teachers something tangible, evidence-based, that they can use to support their emotional health. Are we able to go in and change a lot of the structural problems? Are we able to change the fact that they've been victims of violence? Of course not. But these are evidence-based psychological approaches which anyone can learn and practice, and which have shown to reduce anxiety, depression, anger, and trauma reactions. And I will stop there and hand it over to my colleague.
Thank you, Heidi. Hi, everyone. I'm Joseph Sani from FHI 360. I'm technical advisor. And so we at FHI focus more on the intermediate result number 2, which was youth are positively engaged in the community activities. And the reason why we are bringing this, coming back to this framework, is because our intervention was inspired and based on the positive youth development framework. I will not spend the time on it because I think Rachel did a good job in presenting it. But just in a nutshell, it suffices to say that the PYD framework really looked at the assets and agency contribution and that youth can make and bring into a program. So it's more looking at the potential that young people have rather than the problem. Can you hear me? Rachel?
Yes, we can hear you. Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. So, so the framework really stresses less problems and more the potential young people bring into an activity or in their communities. Is understanding why not why young people are quote unquote sick or vulnerable, but more how most of them are resilient and what they can bring. So in our case, in operational, the problem generally or the difference between programs is how do you operationalize the PYD concept? In this case, to make sure that young people are positively engaged in their community, we put in place a multi-stage process, starting by developing the skills, research skills of young people through the community mapping, allowing them through the community mapping to look at their community from their own eyes and analyze their communities and provide and identify resources and opportunities that may affect young people, but also the community themselves, so that they can begin to design the type of interventions they feel comfortable with and can lead. So the first activity we did was community youth mapping, where we engage 30 youth per community, so a total of 360 young people to go around in the community, engage with adults, identify resources that they may not have identified before, and also identify some of the opportunities that can lead to youth activities and that can provide opportunities for development, for youth development. So that was the first step. So we recruited 360 youth mappers to conduct that activity. The result of the community youth mapping then led to a system-based stakeholder engagement model, what we call the whole system in the room. This activity brought together in each community 50 to 70 stakeholders. So this is a system-based approach, meaning that we wanted the whole community to be represented in these activities. So it was a three-day workshop where, based on the findings of the youth map, a community youth mapping, the whole community sat together in a facilitated discussion and facilitated strategic planning to identify the type of activities that the community can take as a whole, but led by youth. You will realize that through that process then, not only young people develop skills, they build confidence, and also they begin to change the perceptions, the community perception of youth changes, because this was the first time some community members could see their children actually engage in processes that will contribute to community development, at the same time to improve the life of young people. And they did that during those workshops. Youth were also involved. Local officials, traditional leaders, authorities were involved. Business leaders were also engaged. And for 2 days, they worked together to identify some activities that the community can take as a whole and that youth can lead. And the third activity, we are still planning on it, will be youth community activities. So out of the whole system in the room workshop, so this multi-stakeholders engagement workshop, there are action plans that emerge. Those action plans then, out of those action plans, there are some activities that will be led by youth in the communities. And those activities then will also provide the opportunity for young people not only to contribute to the development of their communities, but also to acquire some necessary skills and build some assets. So those are the three processes, three activities that we are implementing. And through those activities, we are actually operationalizing some of the principles of PYD. We are building youth skills, competencies. We are enabling them to make decisions about issues that affect them. We are also engaging them with community members. And at the same time, we are creating, through those activities, an enabling environment that allow youth to grow and to be part of the community. Just as a contrast, why other objectives are allowing young people to build their skills and competencies with the world of work or livelihoods. This particular set of activities allow young people to be grounded in their communities and contribute to their communities. So we are not only building business savvy youth, well-educated youth, but we are also building, helping to strengthen and to develop community leaders. So you have young people who are able to develop a livelihood, but also at the same time are civically engaged in their community. So so that's in a nutshell the process. So we engage young people and we encourage them to map their community, to understand their community better. As a result, they can then engage with other members of communities to identify actions that will further contribute to the community and also to youth development. And thirdly, youth lead this activity to transform their community, acquire skills, and contribute to the communities. As a result of that process, we mentioned this before, this is the result of midterm evaluation. There have been some positive results that we can see from this process already. And we are hopeful that as we move forward deeper into the process and we scale up and out different activities, we will achieve more results. And as Jackie mentioned and previous speakers mentioned, this process relies on capable local partners, right? We have to invest a lot in strengthening the capacity of our local partners. Particularly, PYD is not generally the frame people are used to in our communities. People are still used to the problem frame rather than the potential of youth. So it requires a lot of capacity strengthening, working together with partners. And the first step in that process is understanding where the partners are coming from, which require an assessment. And that's, I then pass it to my colleague, Abby, who will then explain the type of assessment, capacity assessment that we have implemented to understand our local partners and to work with them starting from where they are. So Abby, please.
Thank you. This is Abby Wilson. I'm the program manager here at FHI 360. And I'm going to pick up where Sani left off to talk a little bit about our youth programming assessment tool, which is a product of the Youth Power Learning platform. So the reason why we wanted to do this type of evaluation in conjunction with the rest of the activities we have with youth is understanding that before we arrived, there were already organizations in Eastern Congo doing work to support youth. And those organizations, because they are youth-serving organizations, may not necessarily respond to all the 4 dimensions of positive youth development. So in order to strengthen them, and as Sani mentioned, to provide an avenue for sustainability of this type of project, we conducted our youth programming assessment tool with our 8 local partners in Eastern Congo. And so this slide shows just the general process, how it works. It's a self-assessment with the organization, and this is key, also with the youth that they work with. So the feedback that we got was not only from within the organization, but with the actual youth beneficiaries of these organizations. So they work together to prioritize their needs and priorities, create action plans that they'll implement to strengthen their ability to serve youth in Eastern Congo. This slide shows the process, and you'll notice it's pretty complicated. The reason why there are multiple steps for the YPAT is to really get that input from the youth that the organizations are working with. So you'll see under the scoring part of the diagram that there are actually could be 2 or 3 different meetings that happen. Some are just with youth to get their feedback on the organization's work, and also within the organization. And all of that feedback comes together in a big meeting where everybody kind of has a conversation about what they're doing well, what they could improve upon, and then they end up with a scorecard that they've reached by consensus, which can be transformed into an action plan. So it is a multi-step process, but we've done that on purpose so that we can get as much input as possible from youth on the ground. So I wanted to show this just one question from the YPAT, and it shows you how the tool is developed. We created it this way so that the people who are responding to the questions can see examples of what a competent level of youth serving organizations can do for their beneficiaries. So, and this is an example from the sort of the domain of contribution of positive youth development. So you see the 4 different levels, and so the organization comes together to figure out which level they're at, and then they have to give their own evidence for why they think they're at a level 3 or 4 or 2. And you'll see some examples here from other countries that we've provided. Here is a photo of one of the reflection meetings in Bukavu. So you can see there are youth. There are some of the youth mappers that we worked with, as well as representatives of the organization. And everybody, I was able to be there for some of these meetings, and I found people are really engaged and excited about what they can see what they can do and what the potential is. So thank you for listening. Back over to you, Jackie.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Abby and Sani, for your presentation. So now we're going to move into the Q&A. We've got quite a lot of questions from the audience, so thank you. Please continue to send your questions in the chat box. And if we can't get to them today, we can definitely have the presenters follow up. We will be sending out answers to any additional questions afterwards. So I'll go back to the beginning. So these first questions might pertain to Pascal or Jackie. The first question we had was how many years or levels of ALP are offered, and how does this align with the EPSP ALP curriculum? Jackie, I don't know if you want to take that question or Pascal.
This is Pascal. Yeah. So in the DRC we have 3 levels for the accelerated learning programs. The first 2 levels are equivalent to the grade 4 of a primary cycle. And for the current activity, the youth activity, we only targeting the level 3, which is a 1-year long program, and it is equivalent to grade 5 and grade 6 of the DRC primary cycle. So it's 2 years in one. It's a condensed version of the last 2 years of a primary cycle in the DRC. Jackie, feel free to chime in and add what you can have to add. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's kind of covered what I understood the question to be. I would just maybe repeat kind of what I was trying to highlight in the presentation, was that in most accelerated learning centers, teachers are using the traditional curriculum that they're borrowing from the primary schools and doing their best to consolidate it into a 1-year lesson plan. And this curriculum, so that's curriculum coming from the EPSP. this IYDA developed curriculum, which is complementary to the XLR program curriculum, is providing teachers with 1 year of curriculum that covers those 2 years. That kind of ensures a harmonized approach to teaching, that the youth in these accelerated programs are all receiving the same level, type, quality, subject matters.
Thank you, Jackie. The next question we had was just about the length of the program. So how long does an individual stay with the program, including all interventions?
So the academic school year depends on the type of program that you're in. If you're in an accelerated learning center, the school year lasts as the same amount of time as the traditional school year. So from about September, October to about May, June. In the TVETs, it depends on which vocational training pathway the youth has selected. Some go for 3 months, some go for 6 months, some go for 9 months. In the centers where we're working, it's usually between 6 to 9 months. The youth are accessing the soft skills training package that's provided via Work Ready Now and BYOB, currently in summer camps. And this is seen as a more viable means to introduce the subject matter in a manner that's not overwhelming to the teachers, and that provides opportunity for the youth to focus solely on this curriculum. And we are working with the Ministries of Social Affairs and with the Ministry of Education and their respective divisions to see how we can pilot an integration into the regular program cycle during the next academic school year.
Great, thanks. We have another question about outcomes measuring. So could you describe what outcomes you're measuring through your routine MEL process?
There's a lot of perception outcome monitoring. I don't know if Pascal wants to talk about the alignment with our outcome indicators with the USAID indicators.
Sure. There is a number of indicators that speak to the what I would say the top line goal level of increasing, youth resiliency to conflict and crisis. And I can just name a few. One is the percentage of youth who report, decreased propensity to engage in violence. That's one indicator that speaks to the goal level, on a top line, level of the result. There is also a number of other indicators like, percentage of youth who, have increased like earnings, and the number of other indicators that we discussed in the presentation. So, and at the very lower level of like outputs, there is this, these indicators like, percentage of teachers trained, and so forth, and number of learners reached through, the different, non-formal education settings. So there's a wide range of indicators that span over the whole chain of the result, starting from the outcome level through the impact, the goal level of the results. Jackie, what do you have to add?
Yeah, at the goal level, at the goal level, we have the indicators that we've already shared. I'm just looking to see if there's anything that we did to add to what you already provided. But yeah, percent of youth showing positive attitudes of tolerance and nonviolence. Yeah, I think we covered it.
Okay, great. The next couple of questions were about the data you presented on the changes. So the first question we got from someone was if there was any changes in adult perceptions of youth. And then also, what is the proportion of youth experiencing the change?
So we are not, unless I'm mistaken, monitoring perception changes amongst the adult population at this time. But that would be something very interesting to look at as you become increasingly able to, access decision-making bodies and contribute to the community decision-making bodies. I don't know if FHI wants to add something on just kind of what they've seen in the field. Do you have something to add?
No, we are not systematically measuring the perceptions, but even though it's an interesting thing to check. We have anecdotes, which is not, we have anecdotes and testimonies, and my colleague just pasted on the chat room some of the testimonials from the youth, but we are not tracking perception in the systematic, adult perception in the systematic way. We can observe changes of attitudes, but I think it would be a good line of inquiry.
Yeah, for sure. And then I don't have all the figures in front of me, but I could say in terms of the second part to that question, I know, for example, the 53% increase of youth who believe that they are valued in society and their positive contributions are recognized. That demonstrates an increase from 23% to over 76% of the respondents. The respondents were a sample size of the population, and I believe we interviewed over 1,100 youth participating in the project.
Great. Another question was about the percentage that of youth that perceive their school as safe. Can you speak to what the program did to improve safety or changes for students to feel safe?
Sure. I think that's a really great question, and it's something that's really interesting. So it's looking at more of the softer interventions rather than the actual safety in terms of infrastructure, which I think is very interesting and relevant in the context. So we did a number of things, some of which was looking at working with schools and parent-teacher committees to establish codes of conduct, and addressing issues and using already existing materials developed with USAID support in terms of prevention of sexual and gender-based violence within schools. And then really I think what's really important is equipping teachers to be able to use positive coping mechanisms in the face of really challenging circumstances and better be able to identify and refer youth that have issues that are related to trauma that they have experienced. Those are some of the things. I think also just increasing the overall quality of education that's being provided influences students' perceptions on their school and learning environment.
Definitely. Great. And this sort of relates to teachers. Someone asked about whether the teacher figures refer to primary, secondary, or ALP.
If the teacher figure, so we're working in the primary, the alternative learning center. So we're looking at the accelerated learning programs as well as the TVETs.
Great, thank you. The next question was about stakeholder engagement. I'm not sure if this might pertain to FHI 360, and it appeared during their presentation, but the question was, did the system-based stakeholder engagement include private sector companies?
Yes, we bring together all elements of the communities, but mind you, we are talking really like rural communities, so the private sector will be owners of shops, of owners of like
Hardware stores
and media. So, but yes, we have that, we engage with the private sector because anyway, to open also opportunities for youth internship, for example. So it is important for us to work with the private sector at that level as well. In each community where we do those, we organize the whole system in the room and follow up activities. Yes.
Great. Another question was about meditation. So did participants ever raise any concerns about the use of meditation? You know, there's some people that might link the term with religiosity or spirituality.
And that would be a great question for Heidi.
Heidi, do you want to take that question about meditation?
Okay, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry, everyone. Yeah, so this is a very good point, and this is not just a DRC specific point. Meditation is, in some contexts, associated with religiosity, but the reality is meditation has become one of the most evidence-based and relied upon tools in psychological treatment. And so it's really about packaging it. So the type of meditation you encourage, you're not going to encourage people to think about a higher power necessarily. You would have them, you know, imagine a stream, imagine a brook, imagine something in nature that's appropriate to the context. The point of meditation is to help people focus on the present moment, and so there really need not be any kind of religious piece to it. It definitely, you know, has come down, and Buddhism gets a lot of the credit for, you know, designing the whole meditation approach, but it has been used, it's been tested, it's one of the most evidence-based approaches to anxiety and depression reduction. So we just take the religiosity out and we focus the meditation on something that is positive to the context.
Great, thank you, Heidi. We have time for just a few more questions. Another person asked about extending these activities to other areas. So they'd like to know if USAID, DRC will be able to extend these activities to other post-conflict areas of the provinces of North and South Kivu and those targeted for the first 3 years in Eastern DRC, so that these young people can also participate and commit to the community development.
Yes, this is Pascal from USAID DRC. Yes, that option is being discussed for a possible expansion geographically to include Beni and Butembo, which are some other zones, you know, of North Kivu, where there's a lot of need. So yeah, it's an option that's being discussed. And the mission, the DRC mission here is, you know, pivoting to the east and trying to expand activities in a number of other territories and zones of the eastern part of the country. Yes.
Great, thank you. I think we'll just do one more question. This question was for Sani. And it was about partner capacity building. They wanted to know, how does this take place in practice? Is it constant support approach throughout, or specific training and knowledge transfer during a specific program period or phase?
At the beginning, so first of all, we train our partners. We work with them on the PYD, on the positivity development modules. So a whole curriculum that we have developed here at FHI. I don't know if it is available online. So we did that piece, and then we worked with them as they were also supporting young people in community youth mapping. And after that, when we started the whole system, the multi-stakeholder engagement, we also trained them and advised them on multi-stakeholder engagement processes. So system-based approaches as well. And after that, we work with them through the YPAT, because as the youth programming assessment tool is also a capacity building tool, because it's not just an assessment just to identify needs and build a capacity development plan, but it's also making the partner aware of the areas in need of improvement and how actually you conduct self-assessment. And we are also developing a series of workshops on particular needs that we have identified through the white paper to work with our partners. And we have an infrastructure of field agents who work with our partners in a like coaching and mentoring base, and also help them troubleshoot issues as they implement activities. Again, this is not to the risk here is to create a dependency, but we are aware of that risk. So there is always, we really put the partners on the driver's seats, and then we provide support just to make sure that there is we limit that of dependence. So that's a kind of the package we offer in terms of capacity strengthening.
Wonderful, thank you. So we're just about out of time, but thank you so much for your questions. Thank you, Heidi, Jackie, Pascal, Saini, and Abby for your answers. So we're just going to wrap up. So what can you do next? So you can contribute to the message of positive youth development. You can visit our Youth Power social media on Twitter and Facebook. You can also join the Youth Power community of practice. If you visit youthpower.org, you can find more information about those communities of practice. You can also access all of our resources, best practices, and knowledge shared. And if you have any resources that advance the evidence base on positive youth development, please email info@youthpower.org. We also have another webinar tomorrow that's hosted by our cross-sectoral skills community of practice. This is focusing on social emotional learning. So definitely check that out. That will be at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. And thank you so much for participating in this event. A recording of today's event and these slides will be sent to all registrants. And again, please visit youthpower.org for more information. We'll be sending that out within the next week or two. Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you for attending. Bye. Have a good day.
Bye.